ISA 200 is the first ISA standard. To me, it is a standard that says stop. Before you move on with the rest of the ISAs, you need to first take a step back and understand what you're trying to achieve. In other words, you need to think about what the objectives of an audit are. This is important because when you consider duties, roles, and responsibilities, and you are unsure of whether or not they should be performed by the auditor, you need to come back to these objectives and consider if those responsibilities in question aid in or result in one of these objectives being met. For example, when we look at ISA240 on fraud, it is important to note the difference between management's responsibility relating to fraud and the auditor's responsibilities relating to fraud. In the knowledge clip on ISA240, we refer to the overall audit objectives and see how this affects the auditor's responsibilities in relation to fraud. ISA200 paragraph 11 indicates two overall audit objectives. The first objective is to express an opinion that the financial statements comply with financial reporting requirements and that there are no material misstatements. This would be in the form of a reasonable assurance opinion. Now, you should be familiar with what reasonable assurance means since this was covered in Module 1. You should make the connection and links between the modules. The second objective is to communicate findings as required by the ISAs. So, for example, when providing the audit opinion and audit report, it has to be done in accordance with the requirements of ISA200, 705, and 706. The wording and structure of the report is set out in these standards, and there are templates that must be used. The engagement partner does not have artistic license to structure the audit report in a creative manner. Similarly, when communicating audit matters and deficiencies in internal controls, the auditor is required to comply with ISA260 and ISA265 respectively. ISA200 also provides 5 requirements for the audit. The first 3 requirements relate to ethical requirements, professional skepticism, and professional judgment. These concepts were covered in detail in Module 1. The fourth requirement is to obtain sufficient, appropriate audit evidence. This was also covered in Module 1 under the elements of an assurance engagement. It is important for you to start making links between concepts and between modules, as you cannot study auditing in modular boxes. All the concepts and principles build on each other and work together. Sufficient appropriate audit evidence simply requires the auditor to gather enough evidence that is suitable to draw a reasonable conclusion. The last requirement is to comply with the ISAs when performing an audit. Now, it is probably worth mentioning here that ISA200 and ASA200 are the same in all material respects, with the exception of 2 situations. The first difference relates to a situation where compliance with the ISAs will not be required. Both ISA200 and ASA200 indicate that compliance with the ISAs will not be required when the entire ISA is not relevant, and when a specific requirement of an ISA is not relevant because it is conditional and that condition does not exist. Now, this is where ISA200 stops. ASA200 goes one step further and indicates that compliance with audit standards would not be required when the balance or transaction is immaterial. The second difference relates to departures from relevant ISA requirements due to an inability to comply. This is covered in ISA200 paragraph 23. ASA200 replaces this paragraph with OS 23.1. You should note here that where the ASAs differ from the ISAs, the paragraph reference would have OS in front of it. This is how you can identify paragraphs that differ from the ISAs. ASA200 paragraph OS 23.1 says the same thing as ISA200 paragraph 23, except it adds an additional requirement for the auditor to document specifics about the departure. So if you are an auditor in Australia and are unable to comply with the relevant auditing standard, you would be required to document the following in order to comply with ASA200 paragraph OS 23.1. Circumstances surrounding the inability to comply, the reasons for the inability to comply, and a justification of how other procedures would achieve the objective of that requirement. To recap, ISA200 provides the overall objective of an audit and also provides the general requirements when conducting an audit.